Hello everyone. I did a flip through this little Cocoa Krispies junk journal, and I got a lot of questions about how I do the coffee dyeing of my papers. So I decided that I would show you exactly how I do it. The problem is I can't put my computer in the kitchen, so I'm just going to have to wing it and show you how I do it in here. So these are some of the papers that I used for this book, and these are some of the papers that I used that aren't cut. So there are book pages and composition book pages and dictionary pages, the game book pages, some textbook pages. I've got scrapbook paper that I do, just regular scrapbook paper. I do envelopes. I try not to do the security envelopes with the plastic little windows in them because they do tend to not melt entirely, but they are not happy. I do envelopes, little envelopes usually that don't have the plastic in them. I do tags, I do guest checks and tickets and all kinds of stuff. Tracing paper is really, really nice for this, and it really sounds great. The tracing paper really sounds great. So what I have been using is Folgers instant coffee, crystals, the classic roast, and this is expired. I bought it a long time ago, never used it, and decided instead of throwing it out, I would do some coffee dyed papers with it. So that's what I use. All right. And what I use is I've got a measuring cup here. I use this for all kinds of stuff. And I have about half a cup of a little warmer than warm. It's cold day and it feels really nice. So it's pretty, it's not hot, but it is on the hot side. So all I do is take a big teaspoon and that's probably too much. And a really good heaping teaspoon I put in there. And I try not to spill it all over the place, which I did. All right. So a great big heaping, it's probably more closer to a tablespoon. And I do stir it until it dissolves real well. So it's really, really dark. Extremely, extremely dark. And it takes a while to dissolve, so I make sure it is well dissolved and I don't see anything floating in the water anymore before I start. And that is what I use for coffee dyeing. It's probably really, really strong coffee. I don't really drink coffee, so it's probably way stronger than anyone could ever drink. But that's what I use. So get that out of the way. And I use a paintbrush like this for painting my paper. So let me get my thingies out here. I do bake them in the oven. And I use these trays that have the holes in them because that's what I have. Any baking sheets will really work. And I do use parchment paper. You can find parchment paper at the Dollar Tree. It is there with the plastic bags and the aluminum foil. Well, aluminum foil for sure. So I use the parchment paper just because I'm putting a lot of stuff on and I don't want it to be dripping through in my oven. So I use a piece of parchment paper. So what I do is I just brush my coffee on my paper, whatever paper that I'm using. And it does pool up a lot. Like that. And I make sure I get all the edges and a couple, make sure I get all the edges and it stays on the edges. All right. So that's what I would put in the oven with all the little crevices and the pools of coffee, just like that. And then I put in the oven at about 300. It goes pretty fast at that rate. I would do maybe 250 or 200. I usually have about 3 or 4 trays going at one time. So I can do this, put one in the oven to start drying, paint another paper, open up the oven, put the new one in and take the old one out. And I kind of rotate. I do best with 3. And kind of rotate the 3 around until they get done. So they look a little like this when you pull them out. Sometimes the pools of coffee don't quite dry. So with the whole paper dry and there's a couple pools left in it, sometimes I'll tilt the paper and let that coffee drip a little bit, put it in the oven for just a few seconds and let that little bit dry. And that causes some more discoloration and some fun stuff going on. So I will put that in the oven just like that. I pull out my pages and I need to do both sides because the underside does not have any coffee coloring. You can see the difference between them. So I do both sides. I don't leave my paper in for very long, just enough to dry the first side, just enough so that when I put the coffee on the second side, it's not soaking wet, because it will take a while to dry if it's soaking wet. So that's all I do is I brush it on the back side and put it back in the oven to dry. Just like that. And I make sure I get all the edges. And it smells really good. And sometimes I dip my brush in and let some drips drip on the page just to have some color variations. But that is how I do it. And then I put that in the oven and dry just a minute or two, not very long at all. I have to watch them pretty closely. So here's some book pages. I've done the first layer or the first side, and they need to be done on the second side. Sometimes they're pretty good, but I like to just make sure. This one just needs a light coat in some places. And if you only do a light coat, make sure you watch them because they can catch fire in the oven. Especially if they don't have very long to dry. So I would throw that in the oven and watch it real carefully. So I haven't added a whole lot there. I do the same thing with tags and envelopes. Here's another piece of paper that I need to do the back side of. I will do that later. Oh, and another book page I think that needs the other side done too. So I do menus, I do maps, I do envelopes. Here is an envelope. It does not have the plastic window in it. And what I do for the envelopes is I get my finger wet and I rub it along the glue part of the envelope just to get that glue off of there, so when I turn it over, it's not gluing itself to anything. So there's no glue on here. And so I brushed all this on the first side, and then I will have to do the other side because it's not done yet. I don't think I did the other side of the menu either. And I usually have to do both sides of the tags as well. So these are pretty much all done, but they do have a lot of variations in them. When I brush the front side, a lot of times the coffee will pool underneath it, and so it causes a lot of different colors to come out. So some of these take coffee a little bit better than others, so they're different colors. And I like that. I like a variation in all the colors. And I make sure that I get coffee on all the strings too. If there's any, if there's strings attached to your tags, I make sure that that the coffee gets all the string as well. So that is it. That's all I do. That's just a quick show. So you can see just how much coffee I put in the water, how much water I use. I do front and back. These tags are done, so I don't need to get those wet again, but I do need to do a little bit more on this menu. And I just brush it on. And quite a bit more on this envelope. This one's really wet now. So I'm going to pop it into the oven and watch it. I've got a little bit of extra color on because I used paper that I was using watercolor papers on. Oh well. And I probably will do coffee or Kool-Aid dyed papers as well. Maybe not today because I have so much coffee that I need to use up, but I do the Kool-Aid pretty much the same way. If you are anxious to do the Kool-Aid dyed papers, I put the Kool-Aid in water bottles and use long brushes inside the water bottles and brush on the color with these. Each brush has its own color, so I usually have like 7 or 8 bottles out there with different colors in them, and each of the bottles has a different brush, so I can put the paint or the dye or the Kool-Aid on, and I usually do one color and then dry it and then put a different color on. But I will show that again later in a different video. So I hope that explains everything. If you have any questions, please leave a comment in the comments below, and I will get back to all of those comments. Thanks for watching.